Good morning. My name is Brittany Garcia, and I am here with someone I hold in high regard.
Oh my gosh!
Generational expert and enthusiast.
That would be me.
Yeah, Megan Johnson.
That's me. I'm so excited to be with Brittany. It's sort of a reversal of roles here.
It is. It's actually very interesting.
Yeah.
Megan, how are you this beautiful morning?
I am super excited. It's Halloween weekend, and we're just talking what we're going to do, what costumes we're going to dress up in.
We are spooky, sweet. Which one?
Yeah. Which is also, it's interesting, Halloween has its own generational component because the costumes I remember as a little kid, I dressed up as Pippi Longstocking. Do you know who that is? And I heard on NPR this morning that one of the more popular Halloween costumes is like a Pokemon, something from Pokemon.
Oh, a Pokemon.
Something
yeah,
from Pokemon.
yeah, that's
But it was
relatable.
like a level of Pokemon I wasn't even familiar with.
Right, yeah. I mean, times are changing, right?
Yes.
So, considering this episode is going to entail all things generation, it's only right we start with that.
Yes.
So, Megan Johnson is somebody who understands the differences between baby boomers, born 1945 through 1964, Generation Xers. Those are the people that were born from 1965 to 1980. And then we have our millennials, born 1981 to 2000. So she is all about how they can live, most importantly, work together successfully without name calling or bloodshed. Unwilling to accept standard by the book generalizations, Megan tackles generational challenges, myths, and misunderstandings head on. Megan demonstrates through her own experience, in-depth research, and program customization that all generations have differences and strengths that go beyond mere age and appearance. So speaking of millennials, I can relate to them myself, considering I am one, right?
You're a millennial. You're a younger millennial.
Right,
Yep, you are.
right.
Yeah.
I'd say we're a pretty interesting bunch myself, but we'll circle back to that later.
Okay.
Megan, I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you for having me as your host when I know you're used to being the one on this side interviewing others.
I'm used to being in charge.
Right, so she gave up charge a little bit today, so thank you for that. Not only do you help mend generational fences in the workforce, but you also have a podcast yourself known as Profits versus Pitfalls, Young Entrepreneurs. We'll dive a little deeper into that later. I want to start off now by asking you more about yourself, Megan. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
All right. Well, I am a professional speaker, and my expertise is generations, the generations in the workforce, and then also generations in our own personal life. And I've been speaking professionally since, 1998.
Oh.
1998. When I began speaking, I was 28 years old, and at the time, I was considered a very young speaker. Like I was a young person in my industry.
Right.
But that's obviously not the case anymore. But
experience.
Yes, now I'm one of the experienced speakers, which is such a weird. It's so weird because I see younger people entering this industry, and it's exciting because they bring on a whole new way of doing things from the stage, marketing. And it's exciting to see that, and
right.
I think to myself, wow, they seem so much more polished and professional than I did when I was that age and entering this industry.
That's
so yes,
interesting.
Yeah, so I'm a professional speaker. Associations, organizations hire me to come in and talk about the generational divide, or more importantly, how to talk about the generational connection. How do we take multiple generations connect, and really how do we recruit and retain younger people without alienating or ticking off our more seasoned people, because we've got these people that have been around for they've been around for years. They've got work experience. They understand the company culture. It's important that they stay on board. They stay engaged with the job, with their career. But we also need to bring in new people.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So just like in the speaking industry, where I find these young people coming into my industry refreshing. The same for every industry. We need to bring in younger people, but we can't lose those seasoned people.
Okay, so you are really just making sure that we don't lose track of the newer or the older generation, right?
Yeah. So my goal is always that we look at the generations, and I think it's important to look across the generational line. If all we do is focus on one generation, because sometimes a client will say, we just really want to hear about millennials.
Oh.
And of course, we love millennials. But to really understand the importance of understanding millennials, we need to understand where the different generations are coming from also.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. Thank you for clarifying for us, Megan. I actually want to keep things on the humor side for a little bit.
I love that side.
Yeah, me too. You know how much I love a good improv show myself. Actually, we're just winging this whole thing, right?
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
So that's what millennials do. We wing it all. So I was reading a published article with over 30 reasons that humor is so important in the workforce. Some reasons include connecting us with others, improving productivity, reducing stress, encouraging collaboration, and so much more. Megan, why do you think it's important for us to take a humoristic approach to such an important topic like generations?
Well, I think everything becomes a little bit easier when there's a humor element. I'm not, I'm not trying to dilute the seriousness of being productive and working effectively, but it's always a little. I think we all enjoy it a little bit more when there's a humorous approach.
Right.
I mean, there was a reason many of us didn't like going to school when we were in grade schools, because the teachers tended to not be very humorous. Which I mean, if you think if you think about the teachers that you remember the most from when you were in school, they're the teachers that were able to inject humor or some levity into a serious topic.
Right.
And an example of that for me would be my biology teacher in college. I remember he's one of my favorite teachers, and I also understood biology in a way I never had previously. I always in school I always struggled in science, and then I got into this biology class where he sort of put a humorous spin on it, and I had the most successful experience in a science class with him. And it was because of him as a teacher. He was a very good teacher, but he also had a good way of putting a little humorous spin on it. And so I think whenever we're tackling any kind of topic, or that we might feel sensitive about, or that may be tough for us to understand, if we have a little humor involved, it makes it more palatable, and it also makes it more memorable. We remember it. We're able to link it to our own emotional experiences, and it sticks in the memory bank a little bit more.
Right, I would agree with that. It's usually not what we say, right? It's how you make people feel that they remember.
Yeah, that's very true.
So the more I think you can make somebody laugh, the more they'll remember you, right?
Yes.
So that's a good point. It's maybe not exactly what you're learning or what you're doing. It's more about the approach you take to it.
I think that's true. Yeah, it's how the approach that you're going to take, that it becomes something we remember, something we reflect upon, and humor is just a way to sort of humor is a way to make that emotional connection happen.
Right.
And that's what you want or that's what I hope my audiences have when I'm talking about the generations, is I want them to have an emotional connection to what we're talking about. And humor is a way to enhance that emotional connection.
Yeah, I agree. The article says it all.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to look at this infamous article.
Yeah, we read a lot on humor. So now that you've told us a little bit more about yourself and your approach, I want to focus on what got you so interested and passionate in generations specifically. So you mentioned that being a Gen Xer yourself.
Gen Xer?
Yeah.
The best generation.
Oh, okay. Well, we're going to dive deeper into that, Megan. You often heard negative comments about Gen Xers. Things like, oh, they're all slackers, gold collar workers, and it's the Beavis and Butthead generation.
Do you remember the show Beavis and Butthead? One of my favorites. Oh, absolutely loved Beavis and Butthead.
So she knew, though, that these terms were unfair, untrue, and hurtful. So Megan began researching small and large businesses to debunk generational myths and discover the most effective ways to solve multi-generational clashes. So that research gave birth to thousands of generational presentations and to your best-selling book, Generations Inc.
Yeah, that I co-wrote with my dad, which was its own generational experiment on its own.
I was about to say, why isn't Larry here? We would have 3 generations now.
Yeah. Larry's living the baby boomer lifestyle, meaning he wakes up when he wants to.
Yeah, but then he comes in and comes out as he pleases, right? So Megan Megan and their book, the strangest thing is that it seems like all those comments just get passed down generation to generation. Yeah. Because I swear I've heard those terms too. In fact, I read an article that almost never ended. I was just scrolling and scrolling, and it was on time, right? So the article was titled Millennials, the Me me generation.
The me generation?
Yeah, me. Yeah.
Not the meme, the me.
Meme, yeah, me. No memes. Although it does work too.
Yeah.
Millennials are lazy, entitled narcissists who still live with their parents.
I'd love to still live with my parents.
But
I'd be happy to move back in with my parents. Those are good times.
yeah, Larry.
Yeah, where's my dad?
Where are you? But the weird thing is, it ended up with why they'll save us. So, can you elaborate more on what got you so passionate about generations specifically?
You made a really good point when we talk about the negative words to describe a younger generation, and that hasn't changed. So when I graduated college back in the 90s, I got my first corporate job. Right out of college, I got this corporate job, and everyone around me told me how lucky I was to have this job. There was a well-known company. One of those old school established companies, been around for years and years and years.
Okay.
And everyone, you're so lucky to get this job. The United States was in the middle of a recession.
Oh.
People with college degrees weren't getting jobs, and I got this job, and everybody's like, oh, this is great. You should be so happy. I hated it. I hated the job with a passion.
Wow.
I kept trying to like the job. I'm a true believer in, you give yourself the mindset,
right?
You jump right in.
Okay.
But oh gosh, I hated the job. I just hated it. And one reason I hated it, one reason it was not a good fit for me. I shouldn't use the word hate so much.
No, I like that you reframed that.
Yeah.
Not a good fit.
It wasn't a good fit for me. Is the expectations of my, at the time, much older managers. They were baby boomers.
Okay.
Their expectations of me were not clear to me. And I'm not implying it was just their fault, because I was also very young in the workforce.
Okay.
And I didn't know how to really express what I needed from them as managers.
Okay.
And so there was this generational disconnect. And I think I would have found more success at that job if I had a better idea of how to communicate with my managers who were older than I was.
Interesting.
They both were men, but I think I would have had been a better fit if I had understood really how to communicate with them, and also had a better understanding of their expectations of me based upon what they believed a good worker or a successful employee, how a successful employee should behave.
Okay.
And I think if I had a better understanding, it would have been a better fit. And so from there, I became interested in how the different generations work together. And I was in my early 20s at the time when this sort of started to muddle around in my brain. At the same time, there was a Time magazine. Time magazine again. Time magazine had published an article about Generation X, my generation, and how difficult we were to work with.
Wow.
We were such a challenge. They were calling us 20-somethings at the time. Because we were 20-something at the time. But we were such a challenge to work. We didn't want to pay our dues. We wanted to be promoted quickly. We wanted to make a lot of money. And I remember having that telling my conversation with my mother about it. And my mother's the one who sort of turned the light on above my head. She said, it's the same thing we've always been saying about the younger generations. And she was right. I began to research, and there were many articles from long before I was even born talking about the younger generation and how difficult the younger generation was to work with. So that hasn't changed. And I make that point in my presentation. We often use the same words to describe every younger generation as they enter the workplace and the marketplace. But what does change is what I call generational signposts. Yep. And generational signposts are events that are specific to one generation. And what generational signposts do is they explain how events, technology, and the economy shape various groups of people. Clusters of people born during a certain time frame have experienced similar situations and can be differentiated from other generations. So does every generational signpost apply to somebody in that generation? No. I mean, there are, I'm not trying to pigeonhole anybody. I'm not trying to stereotype them. But what I'm just trying to do is understand, hey, the experiences I had when I was 15, 16, 17 years old are going to be different than the experiences you had when you're 15, 16, 17 years old. And so your expectation in the workforce as a 20-something now
Okay.
is different than my expectation of the workforce when I was in my 20s. And so let's try to understand that so that we have better, more effective working relationships, right? So that we are more inclusive rather than being exclusive.
Today's day, I think we're all about inclusivity,
Yes,
right?
it is. And I think people hear that, oh, you're talking about generations, you're stereotyping people, you're being exclusive. Actually, it's just the opposite. We want to understand where people are coming from so that we can become more inclusive. So, for example, we work together.
Right.
Brittany is my amazing social media person. And I have discovered that you really do enjoy talking about the work, looking at the work together. I always feel that when I contact you, you're happy to hear from me, and we will go over some certain things. When I was Brittany's age, I didn't want to hear from anybody. Because every time my boss called me when I was in my 20s, it was because something bad had happened. Something was wrong.
Yes.
I'd done something wrong. And so whenever I'd hear my boss's voice on my voicemail, I'm like, really? I don't want to hear from him. So it just kind of some different expectations of generations. And let's understand them so that we can work more effectively together. Or if you're living with multiple generations, live more effectively together.
That's a really good point, Megan. Because not only are we at work, but we have home lives.
Right.
So it's important that we still keep that in mind in our homes, because of all the changes that have been happening. And I mean, the past couple of years have been a lot, right?
Well, yeah, especially now with COVID, you've got multiple generations in one house.
Oh my gosh.
And 48% of Gen Xers are expecting or planning on caring for an aging parent. So you have a Gen Xer caring for an aging parent. That aging parent may be in the house with them too. And then also Gen Xers have their children. Some of their children are still at home too. Yes.
Wow, that's an interesting point. So many generations. And actually, before I even go into my next question, you did mention a generational signpost.
Yes.
Can you just give us an example of maybe a generational signpost in your time?
Okay.
Or just so that they can get a little bit of a better idea of what that signpost is or how they can look for one?
Sure.
Okay.
So one for Generation X, the big one is that Generation X, we were the first generation to have in large numbers both parents working outside of the home.
Oh.
Right. So the job market had begun to open up for women in the late 60s, early 70s. And so we were the first generation to have in large numbers both parents working outside of the home.
Wow.
So many Gen Xers came home to an empty house. We called them latchkey kids. And I like to joke that as a latchkey kid, you'd be let out of school. Your time was your own, because this was before the electronic tether. We didn't even have beepers then.
Oh, okay.
So we'd saunter on home when we feel like it. We let ourselves in the front door because we had our own key.
Oh.
We might have to call one of our parents just to let them know we got home okay.
On your iPhone?
Yes. On that, if you were lucky, you had a phone with a really long cord.
Oh.
It was traditionally in the kitchen, and you hoped it had that long cord so that you could step outside, close the door so no one could hear your conversations. But you give your parents a call, probably leave them a message at work, let them know you got in okay. And there may be a list of chores or some tasks that your mom or dad left you to do, and you had to get them done. But you just had to get them done before your mom and dad came home. And it did foster a sense of independence in Gen Xers, a sense of wanting to work independently.
Okay.
And I like to joke that Gen Xers come on board, and their attitude is, hey, just tell me what you want done, give me the tools and training to do it, and then just leave me alone. Right? Get out of my way.
That's
leave me
where
alone.
that stems from, huh?
Yes.
Here's a key. You're a little adult now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even if you have a Gen Xer who wasn't a latchkey kid, because sure, that happens. I speak to a lot of Gen Xers in my audience that say, I wasn't a latchkey kid, but there was a different attitude about letting your child have a sense of independence than there is now. So, for example, I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and since both of my parents worked, it was if I wanted to go somewhere, I had to take the city bus.
Oh.
So I remember learning to take the city bus when I was about 9 years old, and I would do that by myself. I think very few parents would feel comfortable letting their 9-year-old take the city bus by themselves. It's just a different attitude about what's acceptable for our kids and what's not. That has changed over the years. So So Gen Xers coming onto the workplace with a different set of expectations of their employees, of their managers, than maybe someone like yourself. Or even Generation Z, the generation following Brittany's generation.
Oh, the new generation.
The new generation.
The new lazy kids.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because people often, they take this term millennials and they just throw it on anybody young. So, somebody who just graduated college, they're 21, 22 years old, they're like, oh, that's a millennial. Actually, they're not. It's Gen Z.
They're not.
No,
okay.
Millennials are, they have management positions, they have their own companies. They're not the new kid on the block
They're
anymore.
a little older now, right?
Yeah, you have your responsibility, maturity. You're not living with your parents anymore. Yeah,
yeah, I get it. So Megan, what exactly is a generational bias, and why do you think that we create them ourselves?
Well, generational bias is when you believe your generation is superior to another generation.
Okay.
But or you believe the negative aspects that are assigned to a generation. So as we were talking about, we have this belief that when the younger generation comes on board, we assign those same negative words to them.
Okay.
And it cracks me up because Gen Xers, I hear Gen Xers when I'm interviewing them prior to a presentation. Gen Xers use the same words that I hear baby boomers used to use, 15 years ago. So, for example, a Gen Xer said to me during an interview, the younger generation just doesn't understand. When I started my career, I came in early, I stayed late, I worked the weekends, I did everything that needed to be done to get the job done. And it's interesting how as people age, their perception of how they worked when they were younger is a little bit different. And so Gen Xers will say, but the younger generation now, they show up, they want to be president tomorrow, they expect a raise yesterday, they show up 15 minutes late. If they show up at all, they want to work from home. And but it's interesting because I think it's kind of like, it was uphill both ways.
Right.
That saying, it snowed and it was uphill both ways, that as we get older, I think we have a more romanticized version of how hard we worked when we were younger.
That's interesting.
Yes.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna have to keep that in mind whenever my mom and dad are saying
how hard they worked.
Yeah. Sorry, mom and dad, if you're hearing this.
You didn't work that hard, mom.
Yeah. No, we're good. So now that we're more aware of what a generational bias is, in your opinion, what do you think we can do as a society to make positive changes?
I think that's a great question because that's really the end goal, isn't it? That
right.
we make positive changes. And as elementary as it sounds, it's back to understanding that someone's coming from a place that may be completely different than from where you're coming from. We have an emotional connection to our generational signposts.
Right.
You're dealing with someone from a different generation that does not have that emotional connection. So, for example, for my mother's generation, baby boomers, the workplace was a much different environment than it is now. Her struggles as a professional woman are different than the struggles I've had as a professional woman. I mean, she worked for organizations where it was the rule that women were not going to be promoted to management. I mean, that was the rule.
Okay.
And so, even though I know that fact, I don't know that emotionally.
Correct.
So my assumptions of how I should be treated in the workplace are my assumptions of how I should be treated in the workplace are different than her assumptions because she had battles that I didn't have to have.
Right.
And I didn't have to have them because of my mother's generation. But I think here's where the generational discord happens.
Okay.
Is that sometimes the older generation feels that the younger generation is not appreciative of the sacrifices they made so that they have the advantages that they do now. And that's unrealistic. It's unrealistic to expect a generation who did not have that experience that you had to be as appreciative as we think they should be for what they have today. Right? So for example, Generation Z, the generation that follows millennials,
right?
They've never had to experience dial-up. I've had millennials talk to me about how frustrating it was, when they were in college and they had dial-up, and you'd have to wait to get on the internet, and you might have to wait, 30 seconds for an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Generation Z never had that experience.
Yeah, they have no clue what a VCR is.
Right, that flashing 12.
Yeah.
How frustrating that was.
An iPod Nano.
Oh,
None of this.
We only got, 1,000 songs?
Yeah, 1,000 songs.
Only 1,000 songs.
So that's one of those signposts. I've been thinking, it's like your mom didn't, well, today we wouldn't let a child get on a school bus. But maybe an Uber.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yes. And not city bus, not school bus, city
right?
bus. Yeah, but yeah, we'd let them take an Uber.
Yeah, the signposts are changing, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you're saying to make positive changes, maybe we need to stay more aware.
I would say more aware. And also keep in mind that when you're dealing with someone from a different generation, or really dealing with anybody, their behavior makes sense to them. So their behavior makes sense to them at the time. I think often we take people's behavior personally. We take it personally when we're having conflict.
Right.
When we're getting along, everything's peaches and cream.
Right.
But when we have conflict, we often take their behavior personally. Keep in mind that their behavior makes sense to them at that time. And that, and I think back to my own behavior in my career, and I think, why did I do that? Well, you know what? It made sense to me at the time.
Right.
It
I have a lot
made sense
of those
at the time.
I do. So I think you said also just being appreciative of each other, right? And just being understanding, like, okay, we're going to be different as far as our generational signposts and what we've been through. But if we can appreciate what we've been through for what it is, and just look forward to the future, right?
Appreciative that, again, when it's always hard when a younger generation comes in and challenges the way we've been doing things. Again, because we have an emotional connection to, I've been doing my job, I'm good at it. And
yes, she is.
Then this younger generation comes on board and challenges the way we do things. We often, take it personally.
Right.
Rather than, hey, and just as I was saying about younger people entering my industry, as much as it challenges me, it's like, wow, they're marketing themselves in completely different ways than I have for the past 20 plus years.
Right.
And that's somewhat frustrating. It's like, well, dang it, that's not the way it's done. But I have to look at, hey, they're bringing a breath of fresh air into the industry, and look at the way they're doing things. They're more effective. They're reaching more people. Whatever it is, but I have to allow myself to say it's all right. It's all right that the way I'm doing it now maybe isn't the best way any longer. And let's look at what the younger generation has to offer.
Well, you see, I like that about Megan, at least. Megan is able to recognize that we can get more done together.
Yeah, that's true.
And looking at each other's viewpoints, because I think one of our strengths is always asking, well, what do you think about this?
Yes.
And what do you think about this? So we stay open and adaptive to each other's generations. And that's what I like a lot about Megan herself.
Oh, nice.
Perfect. So speaking of positive changes, on that note, you host a podcast yourself.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I do.
Known as Profits versus Pitfalls.
Yeah, but you got to say that like profit versus pitfalls.
Yeah, and
give it like a
nicer word.
Yeah, well, yeah, like when you see a preview for a movie in a world where there's profit versus pitfalls.
We interview young entrepreneurs.
Yes. That's it. Profit versus pitfalls, young entrepreneurs.
There it is.
Yeah.
So I love this concept, and I want to highlight more on it. First of all, I was just talking about this. I want to commend you and thank you for being a catalyst for positive change moving forward. You can see people for who they are and not what generation they come from. So can you tell us more about your series and what you want to accomplish from Profits versus Pitfalls?
Yeah. So, and I think that's a really good point you've made. It's because it's not just for young entrepreneurs.
Oh, good.
It's
good.
What can we learn from these young entrepreneurs? Okay. And really what intrigued me to begin this series was my entire life I've been fascinated by entrepreneurialism.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Now, what I wanted to do as an entrepreneur changed, throughout my life. Usually it changed depending on what, as a kid, what I might be interested in at the time.
Right.
But I always envisioned that I would start my own business. And that's what fascinates me, is that an entrepreneur can have any level of education, but they can create a business, find an answer to a problem, and build something from it. That has always fascinated me. And I looked at how these young people are entering the world of being an entrepreneur, and they're approaching it all in such different ways.
Right.
And we had recently the youngest entrepreneur that we've ever been interviewed on Young Entrepreneurs. She's 17 years old.
Oh my gosh, Abigail.
I know, she's still in school. She owns a charcuterie business, and and again, this is just a generational kind of different thinking. Almost 100% all her marketing is done on Instagram.
I see it. And it's great marketing.
It is beautiful. But you go to her website, it's very minimalistic. I think there's maybe a form.
Right. I saw it.
Right, where in my general mindset, I think, well, you got to have this huge flashy website. You've got to have like a lot of content. You got to have a lot of stuff on your website. Where her approach is, it's Instagram.
Vice versa.
Yeah, and the website is there almost like, the website's there to send you to Instagram.
That is true.
And so
that is true.
I think it's fascinating how all these different entrepreneurs are approaching their businesses differently.
Okay.
From marketing, from how they develop the product, why they develop the product. We recently had a couple on who has a shampoo hair care line. And they began developing it because they wanted to make a hair care line that was environmentally responsible, that from the packaging to the product itself.
Gave back too.
And then gave back to animals, because every animal should be treated like royalty. That was their tagline.
Yes.
And when I was younger and thinking about my own entrepreneurial journey, giving back like that was never a consideration. As much as I appreciated it at the time, at that age, I never would have thought of developing a business that was part of the reason they developed that business was a way to give back. So what I love about the Young Entrepreneur Series is that we're looking at all these different people from totally different walks of life, how they got to their place in their entrepreneurial journey and what they're doing to be successful. And no matter what age you are, you can learn from this.
I agree.
Being an entrepreneur or not. I mean, you can take business lessons, personal life lessons, because we have some couples there too. We've got a couple different couples. And I love the couples because it's a really great dynamic. But you can take those lessons and apply them to your life, both professionally and personally. And that's what I love about the Young Entrepreneurs.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's always an underlying theme where most of your entrepreneurs want to help make a change, or also help the community, or just make a difference.
Yeah.
So it's like she's connecting with like-minded entrepreneurs that are moving forward, their business in a positive way, but also wanting to make positive change, like yourself.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because that wasn't even anything I sought out. It just was something that you organically you recognize that when you talk to the entrepreneurs about why they started their business, what are they passionate about. Giving back or making a contribution seems to always weave right back into it. No matter, we've had a travel professional, we've had a marketing professional, we've had the hair care line.
Pig in the Peanut.
Yeah, Pig in the Peanut.
Community.
Yes, a catering company talking about, what everything they buy is local and how can they give back. So it's a very interesting theme that again you've noticed organically seems to come through.
It's nice to see. It's nice to see the generations coming together and mending fences.
It is. It's exciting.
For positive change.
It is very exciting.
So I like her series is ongoing.
Yes, it is.
She's always looking for new entrepreneurs,
always
right?
looking for new entrepreneurs.
Younger, older, all generations.
All generations,
She wants to learn more about what got you there.
Yes.
So,
but especially those young entrepreneurs. Those are the ones we're looking for.
Yes. Abigail was her name. She was 17. She was her class vice president.
No, she's class president.
Oh my gosh, sorry for the disrespect, Abigail.
Yeah.
She's her class president. She's a full-time cheerleader. She's a charcuterie extraordinaire.
Yes.
I mean, this girl does it all. So
yeah, she does. And we recently hired her, and she did a spread for me. It was beautiful.
It was beautiful. So awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that with us today, and thank you again for the opportunity, Megan. Now that you have been the most amazing guest on your own.
My own show.
On your own show today. I've just had a blast interviewing you.
Thank you, Brittany.
To wrap things up here, can you share the biggest hurdle you've faced as a speaker, author, and entrepreneur yourself?
Ooh, the biggest hurdle. Oh my gosh, there were so many hurdles. Oh, I think the biggest hurdle is that, and this is, I know this personally, this is my own kind of laziness we're always getting ready to get ready. That's the one. Getting ready to get ready. And that is the hurdle that seems like I struggled with. I still struggle with it. It's like I don't want to put this online till it's perfect. I want to make sure that when we send this email out, it's got everything to the letter. And early on in my speaking career, I heard another professional speaker say, you know what, the article I write, the podcast I create, the book I produce, it's going to be more successful than the podcast you never produce, the book you never write, the article you never publish.
Good point.
It's sometimes you just have to, and we obviously want to put out good quality. We want to put our best foot forward, but sometimes we just have to put our foot forward. And it's going to be better than if you had done nothing at all.
That's a very good point. So do it scared.
Yes, I like that. Do it scared.
Do it scared.
That's perfect because it ties into that's Halloween.
Oh, yes, you're so
Very
right.
Good. Very
you're
good.
so right. And actually, we're circling back all around. So I want to circle back to that Time article that I mentioned earlier on. After what felt like 5 pages of criticism, it ended like this.
Okay.
So, yes, we all have that data about narcissism and laziness and entitlement. But a generation's greatness is not determined by data. It's determined by how they react to the challenges that befall them. And just as important, by how we react to them. Whether you think millennials are the new greatest generation of optimistic entrepreneurs or a group of 80 million people about to implode in a dwarf star of tears when their expectations are unmet, depends largely on how you view change.
Yeah.
So Megan, do you have any last minute advice for everybody that's listening?
I don't think I've ever heard an interview end with implode. I almost don't even know what to say after that. I think you really said it all. It's how we all react to situations.
Agreed.
And that being clear on what it is we want and our expectations. Right. And what we're willing to do to bring people in on our own dream. We all have a dream, we have a vision. What are we going to do to bring people in from across generational lines to make that happen?
I like that. We're going to have to finish off on that point, right?
Oh, yes.
That was amazing. So thank you again for your time today, Megan. You can follow Megan on all the social media outlets.
Thanks to Brittany, you can. Yes.
First of all, though, get her on her very beautiful website. That's www.meganjohnson.com, right?
Yep.
So it's just meganjohnson.com, and then on social media, it's at Megan Johnson Speaker on Instagram. And then we'll have her LinkedIn, her Facebook, all that information so that you can follow her and get more information on Megan.
Yay!
Yay! Thank you so much again for having us here today. Have a great Halloween, everybody, or a great weekend.
Yes.
How should we end off,
Megan?
Yeah.
It's the weekend. It's time to start the weekend.
Right. Happy Friday. And we'll be back soon,
yes,
right? With more interviews.
I normally don't like to be questioned, but this has been good.
This was good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.